Welcome back to Jeff Koinange Live here at Citizen Television. We've been talking foreign affairs, Kenya to the world. That's right, and we have the Principal Secretary for Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, Dr. Korir Sing'oei. And we'll talk about the President's state visit to the U.S. before the break. Let's stay in that part of the world for a second, Dr. and talk about Haiti. It's been a big bone of contention whether Kenya is going to send police officers to police Haiti. What are your thoughts?
So Haiti is a very important country from the perspective of being the first country led by black people in the Western Hemisphere to emancipate itself from slavery and to become an independent state. And on that foundation, Haiti then became an inspiration for many other liberation struggles across Africa, including in our own country. Over the years, of course, we know the story of Haiti. It has gone from being a great country to being a basket case. It's a country in great turmoil. On account of its situation, and on account of the pronouncement of the African Union that countries in the Caribbean are part of our global diaspora, so to speak, and on account of the call for action to help Haiti, President Ruto responded to that call at the UN General Assembly and urged the world to be able to come together in support of Haiti. Now, as you know, the United Nations Security Council then passed a very important resolution, Resolution 2699 last year. That resolution established the MSS, the International Security Support Mission for Haiti, and mandated Kenya to lead that mission. The long and short of it is that Kenya has the mandate to lead this police mission that is charged with the responsibility of providing capacity to the police, to the Haitian police. But of course, we know that the matter became contested here. It was litigated before our courts. Our courts pronounced itself on the matter, notably that the manner in which the state had sought to deploy was inappropriate and even unconstitutional insofar as the role of the National Security Council to deploy the police did not exist or is not recognized under our Constitution. Instead, the court cancelled that what was required was a bilateral reciprocal arrangement between Kenya and Haiti, which is basically an agreement that says that this is how we deal with our police forces. These are the guarantees for security, and this is how we deal with any cases of infraction or any case of human rights violations. This is the framework for our joint action. And so what happened between the time when the court pronounced itself on that matter and the present is that we now have a bilateral reciprocal agreement between Kenya and Haiti. It was signed here in Nairobi by the former Prime Minister Oriol Henry.
Who was disallowed back home.
Then disallowed back home, as you know.
Correct.
But nevertheless, even though the situation went from bad to worse, there has been a measure of reestablishment of order. There is now in place a presidential council headed by a president who has been elected consensually with a lot of support from the entire Caribbean leadership as well as Kenya and other countries. And there is now a prime minister in place. There are other structures that have been proposed, including a National Security Council for Haiti, and a number of other structures, including a parliament. Now, under that framework then, in conjunction with the resolution of the United Nations Security Council 2699, Kenya is in a position now to be able to move in the direction of deployment. We have the United Nations has now set up a funding mechanism, a trust fund to be able to support not just Kenya, but a number of countries that are troop contributing, including Benin, Burundi, Chad, and countries within the Caribbean itself, including Jamaica, and Barbados. And so this is truly a multinational security support operation to support the Haitian security infrastructure to be able to push back the marauding gangs in Haiti and reestablish law and order. That's essentially the mandate of this force. Yeah. And so I can say without equivocation at this point in time that the reason Kenya is doing this is that it's been called upon to provide this leadership by the international community. It is now an obligation encoded in a United Nations Security Council resolution, and Kenya is now duty-bound to be able to do this insofar as it has been able to comply with our own domestic laws and processes.
Yeah. I hope in the meantime the Kenyans can learn some French or some patois, because those are the ganglands.
There is a lot of training that is already taking place. As you know, the police has been, the contingent that will be deployed has been undergoing training, including in language training. They're working together with counterparts from different parts of the world. There is, a contingent that is supporting them in terms of language competency. We have support from France. We have support from, from basically a number of other language providers who are helping our
so you're confident we're going to be all right?
Our confidence is born of the fact, Jeff, that Kenya has been out there
in peacekeeping operations.
In East Timor, far-flung areas.
Croatia.
In Croatia, in the Balkans. In very hostile environments where they did not actually understand the language at all. But what Kenya is known for, and what it's credited for, is that it's always non-partisan. It is committed to the task at hand. It is disciplined, and it's governed by the laws of a given task, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay. From the Atlantic, let's come all the way back this side and talk about the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia had signed a deal with Somaliland a while back to be able to use their port. But now I think they reversed or reneged on that deal. Or what's the latest with that?
Jeff, I think important to mention that we live in a very complex region, and every country has legitimate needs, legitimate aspirations. But in the pursuit of these legitimate aspirations, it's important that cardinal principles of international law are observed. And I think critical amongst these principles is respect for territorial integrity. And so, whereas our brothers and sisters in Ethiopia have this legitimate desire for a stable access to the ocean, in order to drive its own trade, and export and import commodities, the reality is that it's got to deal with the entity that is recognized under international law, which is the federal government in Mogadishu. And so the position that Kenya has continued to take is that these parties need to sit together and address this particular challenge. And we've held a couple of meetings, and we continue to hold those meetings here in Nairobi with a view to bridging the gap between these two countries. And we are seeing increasingly a willingness on the part of the parties to be able to come to an agreement and a meeting of the minds on this matter. Yeah.
Is it frustrating sometimes when you think you're taking one step forward and then it becomes two steps backwards in diplomacy?
I think it's difficult. Because you're right. We were dealing. Look at how this year has been, or last year has been. We were smarting, or we're still dealing with the Ukrainian crisis, and then suddenly the Middle East exploded into serious conflagration, and as if that was not enough, Sudan, went south. And we are caught up in all these situations, and a stable country, an important critical country like Ethiopia, becoming then embroiled in this situation with Somalia makes it a lot harder. But thankfully, under the aegis of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, we continue really to pull together with a view to seeking solutions, both in the case of Sudan, but also in the case that involves Somalia and Ethiopia.
Yeah. Speaking of Somalia, recently, Somali Prime Minister Barre was in town.
It's this week.
This week?
He's still in town.
He's still in town. Yes. He met with Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua.
Absolutely.
What's going on? I mean, and there's lots of trade conferences happening. Let's sell Mogadishu, let's sell Somalia. What's going on?
What's going on really is that Somalia is rising again. From the ashes of a horrible inter-ethnic, inter-clan conflict, this country of very resilient, very entrepreneurial people is beginning to come to terms with its own destiny. And that's why you have seen very deliberate action on the part of Kenya to nudge Somalia, for example, to not only stabilize internally through, and Kenya has provided quite some support through ADMIS, working together with neighboring countries. But aside from that, having then ensured increased stability, aside from that, then nudging Somalia to join the EAC. The reason, Jeff, is that Somalia has immense potential in the blue economy, potential in terms of hydrocarbons, but most importantly for Kenya, potential in terms of opportunities for our young people to be able to work there. We already have, I can tell you, in the region of about 20,000 Kenyans. In Somalia, working today. You've seen the remittance figures in terms of how much money is coming into Kenya from Somalia, on account of our young people who are working in Somalia. The figures are pretty impressive.
But, okay, 20,000, that's impressive.
Yeah.
The question is, now that relationships are warming, what's the visa policy for Kenyans in Somalia and vice versa?
That's part of the reason why this meeting was taking place, just to be able to ensure that the security concerns, that Kenya has with regard to access by Somalia to Kenya must be addressed, and certain frameworks are being negotiated and worked on concertedly by our two parties. Similarly, Kenyans are having difficulty with regard to visas into Somalia, where at the expiration of a 30-day period, a 30-day stay in Somalia, every other day you incur a charge of $10 unless that visa has been extended. So it becomes completely counterproductive to the larger objectives of integration.
Is that going to change?
That's going to change, and we're working very, very hard, and that's why, Deputy President Gachagua, and Prime Minister Hamza met, and, there are about 3 or 4 MOUs that were agreed upon, but the specific ones touching on visa, touching on migration and movement of people and goods, some of those, the finer points of those frameworks are still being negotiated. So
the overall relationship between Nairobi and Mogadishu, you would define it as?
I think it's very, very positive. It's growing from strength to strength, born out of the personal commitment of both President Ruto and President Sheikh Hassan. They're working together on a lot of areas.
Speaking of President Ruto, his dream is to have a visa-free continent where you can walk into just about every country and not be asked for a visa. Do you see that dream happening in our lifetime?
It's completely feasible. It's completely feasible. We cannot realize the dream of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We cannot achieve total integration and facilitate the movement of goods across the continent without lifting the barriers around visas. And that's why in Kenya the electronic travel authorization processes and frameworks have been put in place. The essence of it is really to facilitate through the digital space. It gives our country the ability to allow people in who have already submitted documentation online, or through this digital platform, and without much ado really about anything. And so I think, to my mind, that it is completely feasible. Whatever challenges we may have had with the electronic travel authorization framework are being addressed consistently, and I believe that by the end of the year we'll see less and less complaints emerging, from that system.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Dr. Tari, there's a lot of feedback coming through, so I'm going to go to the magic wall and read some of the feedback, and there could be a couple of questions for you, so stand by. Babu Michael K.E. says, on the issue around the long-awaited visa-free Africa, we just talked about that. What are the timelines on its implementation? How will they keep Kenya safe from terrorists and other groups with ill intentions? What will the strategies and procedures look like? Will we be safe? That's a good question. Will we be safe if we just open up?
And precisely that's why the ETA framework and system is in place. The ETA essentially requires that you submit certain documents. Those documents are then vetted. They are run through, a system that is able to pick out those individuals who already have been flagged, by security agencies globally, as being a threat to peace, or having, character that might prejudice the security of a state. And so because of the ETS system, we are seeing less and less chances of us admitting somebody who would be a security risk. Nevertheless, with regard to countries where there is still not enough data, because this whole system runs on data, where we do not have enough data, that's why we are saying that, that there will be, that we will gradually allow them into the country, but based on, on a given understanding. And so we'll continue to adjust the system, adjust admission on the basis that we have sufficient data that will be able to help us track and flag those persons who may have, who may constitute a threat to our security.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Combed RN says the president's visit to the U.S. is timely. Kindly ask Dr. Sing'oei if we have businessmen and women on the entourage, the core industry players that play a vital role in the growth of our economy.
This is the core of the visit. We have a delegation of not less than 100 business people, both from the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, from the Chamber of Commerce, from KEPSA, and other small and micro enterprises who may not be members of these institutions, coming along with the president. And so as part of the state visit, we have several business engagements. Like I mentioned to you, the president will be hosted by the American Chamber of Commerce in Washington, D.C., AmCham. But also in Atlanta, there'll be a business forum hosted by Kenya. And it will be a Kenya-US, business forum, and it will continue over a 2 or 3 day period. And we will see a couple of deals being signed between, at the B2B level, during those engagements.
Yeah. If you need an MC in Atlanta, I know the place very well.
Cool.
My man. Nyantika Chester says, kindly ask the PS, how far is it vis-a-vis the Kenya-Somalia maritime border row and the Migingo Island issue pitting Kenya and her next-door neighbor, Uganda?
On the maritime matter, I would say that it was adjudicated by the International Court of Justice. The determinations are well known by everybody. But what is important is that Kenya and Somalia are working very closely together with a view to developing a common understanding regarding our maritime boundary outside what was adjudicated. And so I don't think anybody should worry so much at this point in time about the ICJ determination, because as you know, again, ICJ decisions, they're not self-implementing, so to speak. They require, ultimately, the goodwill of the two states. And what has become apparent over this period of time is that our two countries, are working closer and closer together around how they can share resources within our common maritime border.
Yeah. Migingo?
On Migingo, I think again it's not a big issue at this point in time, because we have a very close relationship with our brothers in Uganda. As a matter of fact, Jeff, President Museveni is visiting Kenya now at a head of state visit level on 14th and 15th of this month.
Next week.
And so we are very, very excited to have him here. We do not think the Migingo issue would feature, because we have a common security framework with them. Because the whole idea really was that there were circumstances during which fishermen would be able to, unbeknown to them, be able to enter into the territory of Uganda, and vice versa. We're trying to address that through, joint policing, programs, and educating as well our people within Migingo.
Yeah. President Museveni was here last week during the Heads of State Summit.
It's constant. It's a constant engagement, and that's why
everyone loves Kenya.
There is so much dynamism within the region.
Yeah.
And there's so much interaction. Mama Samia was here as well just last week. Yeah.
Nice. Nicholas Mwai says, please ask Korir Sing'oei Kenya's position on the Gaza-Israeli war.
The whole war and the whole conflict it's painful, it's abhorrent. I think the history is that this conflict has been on and off for decades. Sadly, the international community has not found the resolve to be able to formulate, a sustainable solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I think this conflict, to me, is an indictment on the international community. It represents a failure of the peace and security architecture, and invites reforming this system, because what it says is that this system is unresponsive. It can no longer stop mass atrocities, and I think it's not. We can blame one part, and both parties have a responsibility, but it's no longer just about both parties. It's about the failure of the international system to provide sustainable solutions to this complex challenge.
And is that why the United Nations Security Council is unable to render any critical decision on Gaza?
Absolutely. The Security Council is stalemated. The use of the veto powers, the veto-wielding members, are checkmating each other. And it's become a game when lives are being lost day after day, when children's lives and the future of our mothers, in that region, is basically being imperiled, by this conflict.
Shame.
It is.
True shame. Godfrey Barazawere says, ask Korir Sing'oei, what's the most important responsibility under his stewardship as the PS in the Foreign Affairs docket if we keep getting sorrow stories from Kenyans dying and getting locked up and suffering in foreign countries?
Well, I think Godfrey he's entitled to his opinion. I think we are working day and night to position our country as a country that is attractive for investment. We have seen that over the last 2 years, for example, Kenya has attracted tremendous volumes of FDI. But more fundamentally, even with regard to our diaspora, we have seen a deepening of engagement with our diaspora through our State Department for Diaspora Affairs, and my sister Rosaline is working very hard in this regard. I mean, we are seeing an increasing responsiveness and proactivity on the part of the state to respond, to the challenges that Kenyans face. Of course, there will always be a case or two where, owing to the challenges or the complexity of the situation, suffering may be occasioned, but it's not because the state is not paying attention. It's not because the state is not investing resources. It's sometimes as a result of the complexity of the challenge. But I can assure Godfrey and others like him that our government is committed to ensuring that every member of our diaspora is safe, and can be able to do what they want to do, in a foreign country, insofar as what they're doing is legitimate, insofar as the conditions of their immigration is regular and lawful. That we can be able to do.
Is that why your phone is always on?
That's correct. 24 hours, 24/7.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Kabeta's case is Jambo P.S. Sing'oei. There is a perception that when the West greets you, beware of what they have seen behind your back. Could there be interests our friends have seen here? I think he's talking about the state visit.
I think for sure, Africa is a very attractive continent. It's not just attractive to the West, it's attractive to the East, it's attractive to each of the different countries of our continent. And therefore, I think it's unfair to imagine that it's only the West that has an interest on the continent. And it's also unfair to imagine that interest is necessarily nefarious. It's not necessarily so. I think what is important is for us as a continent to build capacity to be able to ensure that we are able to protect our interests or to position our interests in such a way that it brings benefits to our people.
Okay. Next is Jay Mutinda Sr. says, Dr. Sing'oei is a well-packaged brain on matters foreign policy. Foreign affairs isn't a foreign affair to him. Okay. And Joroge Jr. says, Dr. Korir really fits his job as the PS of Foreign Affairs. He is very articulate, fluent, and perfect. Akosawa. All right. Thank you very much for that. By the way, yes. Tomorrow, South Sudan mediation process here in Nairobi?
It's launching tomorrow.
Go on.
So as you know, in December, actually on Christmas Day, President Salva Kiir Mayardit wrote to President Ruto and requested him to support him in bringing what is called the holdout groups in South Sudan to the table. South Sudan is governed by what is called the revitalized peace agreement. That agreement set up a government of national unity between President Kiir and Mr. Machar, Honorable Machar, together with several other groups. It has, the country has 5 vice presidents, for example, to accommodate, all these different groups. However, there are groups, very important groups within South Sudan that denounced that agreement, and they walked out. Some of them went to the bush and have been waging war and creating instability. Some of them basically went out of the country. Some of them are in Kenya, others in Uganda, yet others in Ethiopia. And so because of these holdout groups, it has become increasingly difficult to be able to, ensure the stability of the country, and most fundamentally to be able to hold an election. And therefore, President Kiir, in his wisdom, requested his brother, President Ruto, to be able to assist in bringing these groups together. And that's what we have been doing, Jeff. Happily, I can tell you that under the leadership of General Sumbeyo and Ambassador Guyo, very accomplished and very experienced mediators mediators. These groups have now been brought together. Over the last 1 week, they've been identifying, their issues, and we've been trying to understand the interests of different groups. And so tomorrow, President Ruto and President Key and other, heads of states from the continent who are attending the Fertilizer Summit will be able to witness the launch of those talks. It is our belief that we will see quite some consensus, because, as you know, Kenya has negotiated, previously in the 90s, it has negotiated a peace deal that ensured the creation of the establishment of the Republic of South Sudan. And we are very, very confident that a stable South Sudan is important to Kenya, but it's important to the entire region. And most importantly, it's important to the people of South Sudan.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And from South Sudan, don't forget about the Greater Sudan.
Even much more so. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is a different place.
When we talk about the president addressing Congress, if he does do that, he'll only be the third African president to ever do that in history. That's
correct. President Nelson Mandela and President Salif Johnson are the others. And so these would be an immense opportunity, an opportunity that he will also use to speak to peace and security challenges within the continent, while at the same time talking about the potential within our continent for investment.
Bottom line, PS, the state of Kenya's situation when it comes to diplomacy, are we in a good space right now?
I think we are in a good place. We are in a place where Kenya is being asked to lead, to do the heavy lifting, to speak for the region. President Ruto's voice is becoming sought after by many actors who want to understand what Africa stands for. And being a leader who has come into office democratically, and a leader who continues to facilitate civic participation in the country, he provides a very compelling view of the continent. And President Ruto seeks to position the continent not as one of necessarily of conflict and deprivation, but a continent of immense opportunity. And therefore, that's a narrative that is a little different from what a lot of people in the West, and sometimes even in the East, have of our continent.
Yeah. Dr. it's good to have you on the show.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks so much.
It's a real pleasure to be here.
Hope we didn't keep you too late.
And
your phone is still ringing, by the way. It's still ringing.
Take it easy. It won't stop. Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Jeff. I appreciate it.
Dr. Korir Sing'oei, folks, the Principal Secretary, Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, talking about Kenya's position in the region, around the continent, and around the world. Kenya stands strong, the way we should, and getting even stronger. Good to know. Good to see, even as we fly our flags high, Kenya's in a good place. Thanks so much for joining us, folks. Remember, if it's Wednesday, it's those 3 letters on the keyboard that follow each other. JKL. Thanks so much for being a part of this show.